Ready, set, go?
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Carol Sissom, and I'm here today with Pastor Bill Jenkins of Indianapolis. He's the pastor of the Church of Acts. Good morning, Pastor.
Good morning.
Thank you, Pastor Bill, for giving us some input on John Dillinger. As you know, Johnny Depp is releasing a very big blockbuster movie on July 1st, and he's telling the life story of John Dillinger. But I come to you, Pastor, first of all, because you're a leading pastor, very prolific in Indianapolis, and you are kind of a spokesperson for good against evil. But you also grew up in Chicago, and I want to talk about that, just kind of a background for us.
Well, yeah, I was, born and raised in the city of Chicago, so I lived about a mile or a half a mile, actually, from exactly where John Dillinger was shot. So I have a little bit of experience, not a whole lot of knowledge, but just a little bit, from when I was a boy.
So what was it like? What was growing up in Chicago like?
Well, it was hard. I mean, we actually lived in a pretty good area, but when I had to go to school, I had to take the city bus. And I had to go through 3 or 4 different, what we would call gang turfs, and different colors, different shoes, different shirts that you wear would represent different gangs. So I had to actually be very careful going through these 3 gang turfs with the shoes I had, the colors I wore, or the shirt that I had on.
So, and I understand that you live not very far from the Biograph Theater where John Dillinger was shot outside of there.
Yeah, that whole area right there. As a matter of fact, that's where I used to catch the bus every day to go to school. And it was about a half a mile from where I actually had lived.
Did you ever see any movies in there?
Actually, the first movie I ever seen was in there, yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? What was it?
It was Scarface.
Wow.
So it was a bad movie.
Now, do you think that was a good area? I mean, I know you weren't around in 1934, but what was it maybe like?
Well, that area was really known as the Gold Coast area, so really in Chicago. It's on the north side, about half a mile from the lake, and it really is a very nice area, probably the nicest area in all of Chicago. It's about just a few miles, 3 miles maybe from Wrigley Field. So that whole area was a nice area, kind of low crime, but they did have, back in the 30s, from my understanding in that area, they did have, some of the crime people were hanging out in that area.
Do you know anything about the crime in Chicago as far as would that have been? A lot of it said that John Dillinger, and we will get into that later, but that he, kind of got into organized crime. Was that
Yeah, there is organized crime. I mean, the gangs are affiliated with some of the organized crime there. So a lot of the things that go on, have to go through some of the organized crime. So it may not be a spoken thing all the time, but it definitely is something that, when you're there, you live there, you know what's going on.
Well, let's talk about, and I know you weren't around back then, but John Dillinger was, and the family has asked me, as you know, I'm writing a book about John Dillinger, and the family has asked me to tell about the good side of their brother and their uncle. And I'm having a little bit of a hard time. I mean, obviously he's not around, I can't interview him and get to know his heart, but the family wants to portray the good heart and the good side of John Dillinger, who was raised in a Christian home. He was raised by a father who was a deacon in the church. And we even have John Dillinger's Bible promotion card here. How can someone be raised in a Christian home, be brought up as a Baptist or a Christian, and then turn into a life of crime? What could go wrong there?
Well, there's a lot of things that go into it, but on my mind, 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 33 tells us that bad company corrupts good morals. So whenever we hang around people, no matter how much we've been taught in that home, if we don't have the influence on a continual basis of good and God in our lives, what can happen is we can be influenced by other things. For instance, if we hang out with the wrong friends, John Dillinger didn't graduate from high school, so he didn't have those kind of luxuries afforded to him. So, I mean, whenever we do not take seriously the people that we hang around, it will affect us and it will corrupt our morals.
So even if he grew up, maybe up until 1st or 2nd grade, even that foundation, you could still corrupt it.
And it doesn't mean that inside of him he didn't have, some conviction inside of him. We don't know. We don't know his heart. It's hard for us to judge a man. Sometimes we attempt to do that, but it's very unfair sometimes to do that. I'm not here to stick up or defend him for the things that he did, but all of us have things that if we were caught, we'd probably end up in jail for. And if you look in the Bible, you see even priests in the Bible. Eli had 2 sons. Here Eli is a priest, trying to do what he could for the Lord, but his 2 sons were corrupt. You look at Aaron, a very prominent Bible figure. He was a priest as well, and he had 2 sons that were corrupt. So just because we raise our kids in the wisdom and admonition of the Lord doesn't mean that they don't have a free will and doesn't mean they don't have choice. So sooner or later, as they grow up, they're going to realize that they have a will, and sometimes it may be different than ours, and they do have a choice. They're free moral agents. God does not force us or make us or coerce us to serve him. We have a choice. So even though we may have a lot of good in us, it's still our responsibility to apply that truth that we've received.
Now, would you be able to answer this question, and I know this is just your opinion. Okay, John Dillinger, he's robbing bank after bank after bank. What was his I guess accountability to the Lord for that? Maybe he did go in a church and he accepted Christ as his Savior. It's obvious from all his scriptures and the way his family brought him up. What was his accountability to God for that?
Well, the bottom line is we always believe that God is a gracious, merciful, and loving God. We may like to send everybody to hell. We might like to